we shy away from our responsibilities where we are actually privileged. Let's fight about black. When we talk about men versus women, hey, now I want to be quiet. I don't want to call my friends out on the sexist jokes or the fact that they treat women like shit. But when it comes to black issues, now I want to be very, very loud. All right? The best things to be in this world, as it stands right now: white, male, Christian, able-bodied, English-speaking, heterosexual.
Yep.
Those are the 6 characteristics that you really, really want.
This week, I bumped into a philosopher, a challenger of beliefs, a marketeer, and a man who refuses to cut his beard. I actually think it's there so he can stroke it whilst thinking. He goes by the name Benjamin Iwisi, and we had a very interesting conversation on several topics such as slavery.
Slavery is a great example, Mnotho. Slavery is a great example because we like to talk about slavery, particularly the transatlantic slave trade, as something that black people... No. Slavery is a human thing that humans do to humans. Just like
true.
war,
Yeah.
all right? Yes, the last iteration of it at the massive scale, the transatlantic one that took Africans from here to other parts of the world, is the one we discussed the most. But it's not unique. And do you know why slavery took so long to end? One of the reasons?
His challenge with religion.
No, literally.
Yeah.
All right? There are some terrible chapters in that book where if you read it, you will be convinced that these people are psychopathic tribes of murderers. That's what they are. Okay? Convinced that what they're doing is righteous.
Sure.
But you could not do those things today and be upheld. Because of how, and this is another reason of religion, is that because of how religion is instituted and the way it's taught, is that it's ingrained in the mentality of very young people. People are taught religion from a very, very young age, right? So it becomes part of your self-identity, right? If you're not careful. And if you don't free yourself from it later, it just becomes who you are, right? Not to say free as if you're in captivity. I think it'd be a very perfectly good thing, but it can be a negative thing as well.
And as always, in true I bumped into style, we go deep.
Is there something you holding on to that you need to let go of?
Yeah, I guess.
I'm your host, Mnotho Mtshali, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed having an intriguing conversation with our guest, Ben Iwisi.
Cool.
Yes, so thank you for joining me and welcoming me into your Van Sway home and showing me a piece of your lovely life. And yeah, I appreciate it for you taking the time. It's actually taken quite a bit of time for us to do this, but I'm glad we're doing it. So I want to get straight into it. Welcome to I Bumped Into.
Cool. Are you still hearing me properly?
Yeah.
100%.
You can just bring it, be comfortable. That's fine. But just speak into it, right?
Speak into it.
Yes.
All right, cool.
That's perfect. Okay, cool. So, Mr. Ben Iwisi, I know you actually, but for the people who actually don't know you, I'm going to try a different view here. So, how would your wife describe Ben Iwisi?
She's right here. You can ask her.
In third person.
In third person. How would she describe me? She'd probably say I talk a lot. Pretty easygoing. About certain things. Some things I'm not easygoing about, I guess. I'm very much about my people. I like spending time around my people. There's our son, Anaeli, our family. Yeah, and I often find myself, I prefer to talk about concepts and ideas and theories more than like people and things. I mean, there's a need for staying abreast of current affairs, but I know as much as I need to know, and then I like to think about more abstract things.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess that's me. And we find ourselves usually just chatting about random stuff. Apart from that, I used to be a soccer fan
Used to, and
Yeah, it's too painful now. I can't watch.
clearly it's the team you're supporting.
I
though.
can't watch football anymore because Manchester United has decided to dash all our hopes. No, but yeah. So I support Manchester United, I guess. Not as big a part of my identity as it used to be. We've been humbled. And yeah, I like you. I mean, not to we often discuss the most random of things. I always find those conversations more enlightening than, oh, this person did that, and oh, did you hear about this guy, and oh, remember that person that we used to work with, now they did this, or this. People in general don't interest me above and beyond their well-being. I hope that everyone's fine, but then I don't really care what Mnotho does on the weekend. What Mnotho thinks, though, is more interesting to me. Yeah.
And you described just now that your wife would actually say you easygoing on some things and easygoing on not easygoing on other things. Like, can you name one thing you're easygoing on and one thing you're not?
So I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to people. I'm quite comfortable around almost any group of people. I'm very much a people's person, so I don't shy away from that. You guys would know in the office, I'm always the first one to be like, guys, let's have a polite beverage after work. Let's catch up with the peeps. I'm quite easygoing in that sense. It's things that I'm quite against. Well, I don't tolerate fools very well. I struggle with but I struggle with. I mean, on a serious sense, like I really struggle with, and I'm actively against, at least what I perceive to be ignorance. Not that I know everything, I don't.
Sure.
But when ignorance has a negative impact on people's lives, I tend to get quite upset by it. And that's why a lot of our conversations are around those type of things, where it's like, people that want to defend their ignorance without thinking about the impact that it has on people. And it's not just politicians and people that have big roles in society.
Sure.
It's everyone. Like, everyone has a responsibility to at least know some things, some important things, right? And I know who determines what's important, right? So yeah, I guess I've got my set of values of what's important and what's not. But there are certain things that are facing us on a daily basis that we need to be cognizant of and actively thinking about. Not all the time. Obviously, you can't. It's stressful to be fighting battles all the time. But I don't like the idea that certain people think we can ignore certain things just because they don't directly affect them, or they think they're not problems for everyone to be concerned about. I think we do need to be concerned about quite a few really important things, and we know what they are. It's just people don't like having the tough conversations.
And you mentioned something that I was actually talking about on LinkedIn, just regarding ignorance, that you're not easygoing with people that are ignorant. But
which is a very dangerous statement, by the way.
Yes.
Because I know that someone can hear that and be like, so who do you determine what's ignorant? How do you determine who's ignorant or not? But like I said, there's certain things that we just know. We people are actively protecting themselves from learning because it's uncomfortable. So like racism, for example, right? South Africa loves to talk about it. But there's people actively either directly or indirectly trying to stop the conversation because they're tired of talking about it, because it upsets them, because it's not fun. Okay, so you don't get to choose that. Like, I don't think you should be allowed to walk away from stuff because it's uncomfortable. Gender inequality, gender violence, things around education and how we're letting our children down. Climate. Like, climate is a real thing, and you don't get to hide behind your race, your gender, your religion, and say, oh, it's my freedom not to engage in that. Okay, well then fuck off. Sorry, am I allowed to?
No, of course.
Okay,
I'll just put explicit, when I do, and it's not safe for children.
I'll try not
it
to
actually segues nicely into...
Sorry, I jumped into your question there. Go ahead, yeah?
Yeah, well, you kind of answered it. What I was talking about was just that some people don't know what they don't know, right? And it comes down to, like, education, for example. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, I'm just trying to think how I described it to this lady, because she was pointing out, similar to you, that people choose to be ignorant, but some people don't know what they don't know, so I don't know if I'm being ignorant or not. And I have an issue similar to you, to people that are educated enough, but then choose to be ignorant.
That is exactly the people I am intolerant of. So I'm not easy going around those things. Look, nobody knows everything.
Sure.
And even myself, I have to struggle. I do struggle from time to time for just jumping from my point of reference, because I might think I'm very knowledgeable in one space, right? But nobody knows everything.
Sure.
So you have to be humble in that sense, and accept that people start from where they start from.
Sure.
Not everyone knows everything.
Everything, yeah.
Right? It's like this weird example of when you go to Mnotho and he's like, "Hey Mnotho, have you heard of what's that artist you're telling me about? Is it Tom Misch or Ben Misch? Tom Misch, right?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh Mnotho, I just heard of this guy." And Mnotho has two options. He can either be like, "Oh, you are so late to the party. Like, how can you not know who this artist is? Like, where have you been living?" Right? Or you can be like, "Oh, dope. Welcome. If you like that, you try these things, and let's take you from where you are in the journey, right?" And you're not allowed to be, you're not allowed to just cut people off because they don't know. But when people do know, then they are, like I said, they're actually against solving the issues, and those people have a problem. And sometimes it's not objective. So what I mean by that is it's not like, it's not always that they know that they're fighting against it. Right? So if you use the racism example, like, some person might not want to engage in the racism conversation. Not because they don't know what racism is or that it doesn't exist. It's just, for whatever reason, they've grown up in a space, or they live in a certain sector of society where they can be dismissive of it without knowing that they're being dismissive of it. That's fine. But some people actively try to pretend that racism is not a problem. Yeah, that's gonna be a fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, yes, it actually segues nicely. I mean, racism is a big issue in South Africa, and obviously, as you've mentioned before, we've spoken a lot. And generally, what I'm going to be speaking about in this podcast episode are things we've spoken about, which I know the answer to, but I want to ask them again, because I think people need to hear this answer, and how we actually had our conversations.
If only give the same answer.
No, it does. Sometimes I actually wish there was someone who was recording our conversations. But I mean, speaking about South Africa, you've described South Africa as a person, and if we had to look at, South Africa as a person, South Africa is going through trauma, right? And they haven't dealt with that trauma, which is now obviously coming to light. 26 years into democracy, So can you just elaborate on that in terms of how South Africa suffered trauma, which I'm sure we're aware of, but how it's actually affecting us now? PTSD, for example.
Yeah, I mean, so look, I mean, I don't proclaim to know South Africa better than anyone else. I arrived in South Africa almost 20 years ago now, and South Africa has been very kind to me. So before anybody starts asking for my residential status, too late, I already got a passport, so can't kick me out. But on a serious note, I mean, it's a lovely country, but it's got a lot of issues. So we say, if you had to look at South Africa as a person, it would have suffered extreme levels of trauma and abuse in its early childhood. It would have sustained a level of absolute violence to its spirit and to its physical body and to its mental state that very few people or countries can emerge from and just be cool. Like, it's tough. It's what happened to South Africa over a long period of time. And we must remember that, we don't just count apartheid. You count what came before apartheid. 1910 is when South Africa became a union, right? Apartheid only started getting ratified in the middle of the century, but in 1910 already separated from Britain, and already society was apartheid-like. They only then just had to take the steps to put it into law. So we're talking about more than 100 years in reality of what apartheid was after official colonialism, right? So, by the time they're putting in Land Acts in 1913 and all these Separate Amenities Acts and all these things, it's hectic, right? And we've only then had about 20, almost 30 years now outside of that space. So you must understand that if you've been abused for 100 years, getting to a place of being healed is 30 years later is just not realistic. That being said, could we be in a better place? Yes. But we shouldn't run away from the facts that we have actually done some good, right? So South Africa didn't descend into civil war, for example. For some reason, we celebrate F.W. de Klerk for that. In reality, it's literally the fact that black people decided not to. With a ratio of 1 to 10, that's not even a civil war. That's genocide, right? So, we have to accept that South Africa has tried as a person to kind of move on. But with such a traumatic beginning, if you had to look at South Africa as a person today, you'd probably look at them in many different ways. You'd analyze their mental state, which I said is obviously traumatized. It obviously requires very high levels of intervention. I don't know if the correct term is a multiple personality disorder or some type of fragmented mental state. There are many different South Africas in South Africa. There's no unified South Africa. There's no unified persona of South Africa. I think that's what Mandela was trying to do when he gave this notion of the rainbow nation, which is good. Countries need ideals to live up to, but you need fundamental things to drive that. You can't just put Rainbow Nation on television and then make sure every ad has a black, white, and colored child in it and then sing Simunye, We Are One, and all these things. And then expect that if you're not doing the things on the ground to fix inequality, that you're going to get there, right? So that's why the dream shattered so quickly. But that was the equivalent of... that's the equivalent of... I watched The Joker recently. I know I was very late, but I watched it recently. That's the equivalent of the Joker putting on a happy face. Literally, that's what South Africa was doing, right? It was putting on a happy face. It was painting all this makeup on itself to the world. But it was terribly, terribly in need of help. So you've got the mental state, and then you've got the emotional state, which is obviously very closely linked, which any type of abuse will have very long-lasting emotional scars. But then unfortunately, you also have physical problems with the country. When I speak physical, I mean the structural issues of just economic inequality, a terrible economy at the moment.
And sorry, just before we get into that, because that was actually going to be my second question from there, just to go back to South Africa quickly in terms of its mental state, with the whole Rainbow Nation, black, colored, whites, Indian, Chinese, etc. Do you feel like South Africa has multiple personalities, which is contributing to us not really having one identity?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, right? And I'll just finish on the point about the economics before, because when you talk about a human being, right? If you want to solve one part, you kind of hope that the other parts are good, right? So if you're trying to fix a mental, emotional problem, right? Because most mental issues obviously have emotional impact. You kind of hope the body is fit. It's very hard for me to treat Mnotho with a mental problem and an emotional problem if he also happens to have, stage 3 cancer. It's just very difficult to do. You need a foundation to work off, and that's why I mentioned that physical bit, because if they wheeled South Africa into the emergency room somewhere and I was the residing doctor, or whatever the term is, within 10 minutes I'd know this person needs to go and have lots of operations because the body's not working, the lungs are failing, okay? The heart is failing because the economy is not growing, the inequality is getting worse, the education system is dropping, you don't have a power supply. These are physical issues. All right. But then while talking to this person, I might also want to send them to a very good psychologist or, therapist, because there's also a lot of deep issues in the mental emotional space. And so where do you start? Right? And that's what I'm saying. If you wanted to kind of fix the history of South Africa and the impact that it has on today, and the violence we see in our society and the inequality, you would hope you had an economy that was working. But it's tough to do both. So, but yeah. To your question now, in terms of multiple personalities, yeah, I mean, so everyone has different persons inside them.
Sure.
You Mnotho at work is not Mnotho outside of work. Is not Mnotho at the groove. I've seen you. You're not the same person, right? And no one is, right? But there's a coherent sense of self. There's an overlying sense of self that when you look in the mirror, you're clear as to who you are. All right? And then you have different versions. I mean, your parents, there's a motto for your parents, there's a motto for your wife, there's a motto for people you like, there's a motto for people you don't like. And every nation has that too. Every nation has subsets of itself. But there's overarching ideas and overarching values that unite all these people. South Africa is diverse, and it really is diverse. It's not the most diverse, but it is very diverse. But what is the overarching idea that unites you? Okay? Many countries have much bigger populations, many more tribes, many more ethnic groups. But they know what they stand for.
Sure.
They have a value system that permeates all of society. And it's not easy to do these things. It's not easy to build these things. You need, we've talked a lot about Noam Chomsky, and he speaks about the structures of society that are required to build identity.
Which are?
Don't test me now. It's been a while.
Well, the ones you can name.
But you can just think about them, right? So obviously you need an education system that lives up to a higher ideal of the country, right? But you first need that idea. And that's what I'm saying. The Rainbow Nation was such a good one. But it wasn't backed up by all the fundamental things, right? So you would want a long-term plan. So let's just take an example, right? So the example is pick a country, any country.
I don't know. Easy. Singapore, maybe?
Okay, so what does Singapore stand for? What is Singapore's goal? What role does it want to play in the world? That you can tell as a foreigner, as a person that wasn't raised in their society, didn't go to the education system, what does Singapore, what does it add value to the world? What does it bring to the world stage, the world economy?
Okay, actually, no. I'd rather choose another country because I thought you were going to describe Singapore in terms of a vision. I can't really answer.
It's up to you.
Let me think.
Pick one that most people can easily tell from the outside.
Yeah, Japan then, and I think what Japan stands for is right now efficiency,
Okay, efficiency.
Yeah.
We make shit best.
Yeah.
Better than anyone else. Okay, cool. Now, I'm not too afraid with the Japanese education system, but I understand they work very hard and they emphasize the skills that would be required to build that country view. And that nation state, right?
Sure.
Every country, just like every human being, needs to be clear what they want to bring to the world. For example, but let's just start with the value of these things, right? Because if you don't know what you as a human being want to bring to the world, it's very difficult to align all those different Mnothos inside you and do something consistent over time, right? And I think it's the same. So probably the best example that I can probably think of is probably Germany before, during, and after the fall of the Third Reich, and the reason why I like Germany or even the United States, not just because they're universally known, but because they actually give really good examples for South Africa, right? So,
So, and sorry to disturb your thought pattern, right? Because I was going to ask this question: which country has actually suffered trauma? And Germany is one of them, obviously, and also like the surrounding countries. And how have they come out of it,
But you need an idea, Mnotho.
Which is idea meaning vision, right?
You need a vision, and that vision needs to represent what you want to be in the world, what you want to bring to the world stage, right? So Rwanda has a very clear vision, all right? We talk a lot now, but it didn't come about overnight, right? They looked at what they had, they looked at where they came from, and they knew that, we want to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and they're focused on that, right? And people will argue and say, "Oh, well, you know, they're not so democratic." Well, democracy is not always the best thing.
Sure.
We can come to that later. But you know, you have to be clear what you want to bring to the world, all
Sure.
right? In terms of how you behave and what you produce effectively, all right?
I'd like to move on to another favorite topic of yours. The talking snake, right? Let's just break down briefly, your challenges with Christianity. And I say, I mean, for the listeners, why I say talking snake is obviously it goes back to the Adam and Eve story where Ben was like, how do you explain that?
That was a setup, but we'll get to that.
But yeah, so I want to know your challenges about. First of all, would you consider yourself a Christian? Are you religious? Let's start there.
No, I'm not religious.
And okay, cool. That's it.
But let's define religious, okay? It does not mean that I do not see value in religion. I think there is an incredible amount of value in religion. I have a young son, and I teach him many lessons that I've gained from religion. And there's a difference between religion and faith.
Yeah.
Right? So, what's going on? Oh, yeah. So there's a difference between religion and faith. I guess we can deconstruct that later. But my issue is not with Christianity per se. I often use Christianity as a vehicle to discuss my issues with religion, primarily because it is the one I am most comfortable and au fait with. I was raised in a Christian home, and I went to Christian schools, and I've read the Bible. The whole the Bible. And I tell people that because I don't think everyone's read the Bible.
From start to finish, basically.
Yes. It takes a very long time to do. Some parts are amazing, some parts are just random. And it's not like I did it in one sitting, but I've read every book of the Bible.
Sure.
Not necessarily in order, but I have read every book of the Bible. And I'll tell you now, there is incredible amounts of value in that book. There's also a lot of stuff that is completely irrelevant for today's age, all right? And also stuff that is plainly wrong. And my issue with it is that we can over-intellectualize this problem, all right? The problem of the fact that the Bible is fundamentally inconsistent, right? But once again, if you take it from whence it comes, if you take it from where it was written, it's a damn good book for when it was written. It gets a lot of things right. Right? It gets a lot of things right. It also gets a lot of things terribly wrong because it was written by misogynistics. Assholes. No, literally.
Yeah.
All right? There are some terrible chapters in that book where if you read it, you'll be convinced that these people are psychopathic tribes of murderers. That's what they are. Okay? Convinced that what they're doing is righteous.
Sure.
But you could not do those things today and be upheld. Right? In any moral sense. Upheld and said, no, this is fine. All right? When I speak about Christianity in particular, I see a value in it like I see a value in almost all religions. And that is because of the fact that life is difficult. Life is guaranteed to hurt you. It's guaranteed to test you. And it can be overwhelmingly difficult for many, many people. Where you find strength, I will not judge you on. If that strength is in the belief that when this life is over, you will go to a better place, it's not for me to take that away from you. If that belief is in the idea that there is a supernatural being that has your particular interests at heart, nobody else's, because that's kind of like the narcissistic side of religion, is that if you're praying for a job, for example, and everyone else is praying for the job, if you get the job, God liked you more than everyone else. And like, but why? If you don't get the job, God has a better thing for you. Like, wow, you're really special. Like, so there's a narcissistic element of it, but that's because human beings are narcissistic, right? We want things to be in our favor.
Well, I mean, it was written by human beings anyways, so.
Right, exactly. So there's that aspect of it, which is fundamentally the idea of hope. Hope is a powerful thing. It's a dangerous thing. where you derive the hope you require to get through what is guaranteed to be a very difficult thing called life, I will not judge you on. Once you tell me that your source of hope needs to be universally true, and that if I don't believe in it, you're going to kill me, I have a problem with that.
Okay.
Once you tell me that the same thing that gives you hope also somehow legitimizes the abuse of women, children, other racial groups, then I will object to that, because it is not enough that your God is fantastic and that it loves you and your people more than anyone else. It must also make you ruler of other people, of other nations and tribes and races, and that it must put women below men, and that it put women so far below men that women can be sexually abused from childhood, and that's okay.
Sure.
Be taken as wives at the age of 10, 11, and that's okay because of your so-called source of hope. The fact that somehow in this whole thing you can abuse young boys as well because of your so-called sense of hope, I will fight vehemently against that. And it's because people don't want to do the hard work of deconstructing their religion that they just shelter behind it, they hide behind it, and they say, well, it's my religion, so I'm allowed to believe in it. And it's like, okay, no, you're not. You're harming people.
It speaks nicely to the points you first raised about ignorance, right?
Yeah. You see, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to say it's my religious freedom to do so. I find it weird that almost every single time I hear religious freedoms invoked, it's to take away somebody else's freedoms. It's to take away somebody else's freedom to their own body, to their own sense of security. It's to take away their innocence, their rights to be either married or just to be black or just to be Indian or just to be something other than whiteness, if that's the predominant religion then. You know, if it's within that race, it's to take away the right to be just dark-skinned as opposed to light-skinned. You know, these are religious freedoms. I find it weird that these things are okay and that people hide behind it. And I know why people hide behind it. And that's why you have to be careful in the way you navigate it. Because of how, and this is another reason of religion, is that because of how religion is instituted and the way it's taught, is that it's ingrained in the mentality of very young people. People are taught religion from a very, very young age, right? So it becomes part of your self-identity, right? If you're not careful. And if you don't free yourself from it later, it just becomes who you are, right? Not to say free as if you're in captivity. I think it'd be a very perfectly good thing, but it can be a negative thing as well. And because of the fact that religion is put into the minds of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, right? It becomes very ingrained in their identity. And because it's ingrained at a level that they cannot understand it, it becomes something they can never question.
Sure.
Right? It's the same way as like you're never supposed to question your parents' authority. And then the day you do, it's a problem. But that's because you're using your own mind, right?
It's a problem.
Religion is a million times worse, right? It's a million times worse than questioning your parents' authority, right? I mean, the Bible tells you to respect your parents, but you have to respect God more fundamentally more than anything else.
Sure.
And because it's so close to the identity of self, and therefore so close to the ego, and so close to what we know to be reality almost, because it's ingrained that this is reality, this is truth. Once you pick at any part of it, you're actually picking away at somebody's ego, somebody's sense of reality, somebody's sense of identity. And they will protect that with all that they have, because it's very difficult to deconstruct yourself. You know, we spoke about it, you know, when you sent me that quote the other day, when you showed, you know, the sculptor.
The sculptor, yeah.
And you know, as the quote goes, it's extremely difficult to for man to reform himself, to reshape himself, because you are, of course, you're both the sculptor and you are the stone, right? So you have to hurt yourself to make yourself better. And people don't like that. But it's even worse when someone's trying to form you from the outside. Now you're not even the sculptor. You're just a stone. And someone's picking away at you and saying, no, actually what you believe in is not, you're not allowed to believe in that because it hurts people. And they might say, who tells me they might react to you and say, well, you know, who says that I'm not allowed to? And I say you're not allowed to. Me.
But whomst are you?
Who are you? And I say, well, I'm me. I'm standing up for what I believe in. Right? I'm not sent by a higher power, but that's what I talk about in terms of responsibility. Everyone's responsibility. Do not defer to the government.
Sure.
If you do not defer to the church, do not defer to even the family, you are responsible for making things better. In as so far as you think what you're doing makes things better. If you're wrong, then you're wrong, but you're doing something, right? I'm not. And I keep saying I'm not the moral compass of the society. I'll be wrong on a lot of things, but I'll speak about it and I'll challenge you on it, right? Now, because I don't want to hurt your feelings, I'll say, oh, I hope his family talks to him, or I hope his church talks to him, or I hope the government does something, or somehow the universe is going to fix this person. No, you did something wrong, and you tried to justify it because of what you believe in, and I'm here to call bullshit. I don't care. You harmed someone. You did not recognize that person is an ends in and of themselves. And your belief structure is giving you this sense of superiority, this sense of agency to do this. You're not allowed to do that. I'm telling you, you're not allowed to.
Yeah, I was about to say, says who?
Yeah, me. Yeah. I'm the one. See, it's a hard thing for people to grasp. That people keep thinking that when I say I think you're wrong, I must be backed up by a million other things. No. I'm looking you in the eyes. I'm telling you you're wrong. That's it. Now you can either engage me on it, and we can deconstruct all these things. Whence you come from in terms of your religion, right, or whatever is giving you the sense of superiority, but it's too many people deferring to other things that allows these things to keep happening, and you hear it in very simple things like, only God can judge me. Hell no, I'll judge you now. You're wrong. You're terribly wrong, all right? And I expect somebody to do the same of me. If somebody comes and says, Ben, you know what when you did that to that child, you were wrong. And I say, who are you? Are you a judge? Are you the government? Are you the police? Are you God? You can tell me, no, I'm not. I'm Mnotho. I saw what you did. And I have the capacity in my mind to say that what you did was wrong.
And okay, so now just building on that, you speak about I say because it's me, I believe we all have our own truths, right? And obviously how we view the world based on our beliefs, religion, etc., how we're brought up. Is there a universal truth per se to say this is because if you think about it, truth is, I think truth is subjective. There's no objective truth.
Okay, so let's go into
and it's because I say so.
Yeah, but let's go into that a little bit, right? So let's just understand what we're talking about here. So when I challenge you and I say it's because I say so, it is not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning of the conversation. What you then owe me is the same. It's to say, but I disagree.
Sure.
Right? There is an incredible amounts of value in what the philosophers used to call dialectics, right? Just these dialogues, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But the entry point to that is that nothing is sacred.
Okay.
That's the entry point to that state. Nothing is sacred. I say that what you did was wrong. You want to defend yourself. Nothing is sacred. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
It could end that you feel differently about what you did, and I feel differently about what you did. It's not, and that's the thing. The problem with human beings is that we often want to be absolutely right. So when I challenge you and I say that what I think you did was wrong, I'm not doing it so that I am right. That's not what I'm doing it for. I don't need, like human beings have shown many, many times that they don't need anyone else to believe in them for them to think that they're right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine. It's okay. But the point is, we're trying to get to a better place. The idea that there are sacred cows or holy cows or whatever the term is, things that cannot be challenged, is what's holding us back. That's what's holding us back. The thing that we cannot challenge the elders. We cannot challenge culture. We cannot challenge tradition or religion. We cannot challenge, what one person said at one point. That's what's holding us back. It is only by saying, I am challenging it, me. Yes, of course, I'm informed by all the things I've read and all the people I've met, but I'm challenging it. And then someone says, "Whomst are you?" which is the natural reaction, which is to say that is the argument from authority. It's a terrible argument. It's a fallacy in argument, like many other fallacies. But it's a fantastic one because people think it's logical that you must have authority, and if I don't recognize that authority, then your
It makes
argument
it
in and of
invalid.
itself is invalid. Like,
Yeah.
no, you can ask me whomst I am, but listen to what I am telling you. You raped that child. You're wrong. Whomst are you? Because my pastor said it's fine. Okay. He's also wrong. Whomst are you? My God said it's fine. Okay, well then your God is wrong. Because this child is traumatized. And they will struggle to ever have a normal life again. And because you are not recognizing their humanity, I'm going to challenge you.
Yeah, and actually, I see now where you're coming from. And the way I actually see it is, as a society, we want to make humans better. So what I mean by that is we are constantly creating a collective truth and changing that, you know. It's not the absolute truth, but it's the collective truth that makes us better. I mean, at one point, slavery was the truth, you know, oppressing women, which is still around. But, you know, misogyny, etc., was the truth, that women should stay at home, etc. But by having these conversations, we have moved forward. We've broken down slavery,
Yes, exactly.
etc.
Slavery is a great example, Mnotho. Slavery is a great example because we like to talk about slavery, particularly the transatlantic slave trade, as something that black people. No. Slavery is a human thing that humans do to humans, just
That's
like
true.
war.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, the last iteration of it at the massive scale, the transatlantic one that took Africans from here to other parts of the world, is the one we discussed the most, but it's not unique. And do you know why slavery took so long to end? One of the reasons?
No.
Okay. Everyone needs to challenge where they are, right? That's what we've kind of agreed upon. You need to call bullshit when you see it. So there were white people calling bullshit. There were children of slave masters living on plantations with all the privilege in the world saying, "Daddy, I don't think this is right. This can't be right," even though they've got nothing to gain from dismantling slavery. And then on the other side, there were children of slaves saying this has to be wrong because they have everything to gain from dismantling slavery. Both those conversations were necessary. In between, what we don't want to discuss is the fact that there were a lot of African leaders that were benefiting so much from the slave trade
That's
that
true.
they didn't want to stop it. Let's fight about black. When we talk about men versus women, hey, now I want to be quiet. I don't want to call my friends out on the sexist jokes or the fact that they treat women like shit. But when it comes to black issues, now I want to be very, very loud. All right? The best things to be in this world, as it stands right now: white, male, Christian, able-bodied, English-speaking, heterosexual.
Yep.
Those are the 6 characteristics that you really, really want. So much war was being driven on the continent purely for the acquisition of slaves that it was one of the major reasons. People were just going around literally kidnapping people because it's human resources are very valuable, right? Now, conversations had to happen on every single level of that chain, from the person right at the bottom to right at the top. And in society, depending on who you are, you can be right at the top of one thing and right at the bottom of the other thing, of something else, because all of us have inherent and privileges and disadvantages, right? And you have to call bullshit regardless of where you are on the spectrum for things to move forward. It requires 2 racist people discussing racism themselves, and then some third person who happens to be their child challenging them, or marrying a black person, just as much. Or, homophobic people and one of their kids being gay or whatever, just as much as the other side having very liberal people going around fighting for equal rights. We cannot have holy cows. We have to dismantle all these holy cows. There's no such thing as a space where this thing cannot be discussed. It must be discussed in the house of the racist. It must be discussed in the house of the misogynist, of the homophobic person, of the person that, for whatever reason, thinks that their religion is the best, right? That must happen. And because we like to focus on where we are unequal, we shy away from our responsibilities where we are actually privileged. Let's fight about black. When we talk about men versus women, now I want to be quiet. I don't want to call my friends out on the sexist jokes or the fact that they treat women like shit. But when it comes to black issues, now I want to be very, very loud. All right? The best things to be in this world, as it stands right now: white, male, Christian, able-bodied, English-speaking, heterosexual.
Yep.
Those are the 6 characteristics that you really, really want. White, male, heterosexual, able-bodied, Christian. Right?
Heterosexual.
Yeah. Hey, there's gay Christians.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just shows how powerful the mind is, because you can create anything, right? You can create anything in your mind. You can be gay and still think that there's a God that loves you, fine. Even though the entire Bible tells you consistently that he would kill you on sight and that you're a mistake, fine. You found your truth. If that helps you get through life, if that gives you hope, stick with it. I'm not going to take it away from you. But if you are not those 5 or 6 things, if you're black, female, lesbian, not able-bodied, atheist, poor, shit, you have to fight all those things, right? Now, I'm black, so I have to fight against white. I'm male, so I don't have to fight about gender issues. I'm straight, so I don't have to fight about equal rights for other forms of love, right? Other forms of love. I'm able-bodied, so I don't have to worry about disabled issues, right? And I'm not economically disadvantaged. I'm not poor, so one might argue I don't have to worry about issues, access to education for poor children. I don't have to worry about that. Now imagine if all I focused on was the one thing that I have to fight, which is my skin color. How far would the rest of society move?
Not very far.
Not very far. Not, right? And that's what I'm saying. You have to call bullshit. Like, you have to say no. And it's exhausting. You can't fight them all the time. But you have to step out of your comfort zone. Now, with the question you asked around, is there universal truth? A universal truth exists only if you need it to exist. And I know that sounds like a very philosophical thing, but it's actually true. The only reason...
It's funny how you say true, yeah?
Yeah, it is true in the sense that it's true in the sense that it's true to me because I need it to be true, right? But in the sense that you don't... It doesn't have to exist if it's not necessary for you. It's not an objective thing, like you said, right? You can buy into it. The fact that you can buy into it means that it's not necessarily true. Do you understand what I'm saying?
And it's so funny how I think to you to reinforce your universal truth, you go and tell people that it's my truth. So the more people that believe in that truth, it makes it even stronger as well. Hence why we go around to say it's the truth, because you want to get more people to actually believe in it.
And every part of the brain works like that.
Yeah.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah, confirmation bias. So just to close off the religion.
We haven't even started talking about religion. We haven't even started talking about religion. We haven't had a chance to talk about atheism and the benefits of it. No, I'm joking.
I feel like a lot of religious people have a universal truth that there is a God, right?
Okay.
Do you believe? Well, okay, I'm assuming, right? And the Christians, Muslims can always come and prove me wrong. Do you believe in there's a God? And if no,
define God. What definition are we using?
And I hate to use a simple explanation, but just a higher power, the great Almighty. I'm just trying to think.
Let's be clear.
Okay, so how would I? You see, I can't really define God because I'm two ways about this at the moment. Because why I say that is because I'm always challenging my beliefs, right? Because I was brought up in a Christian home, but now as I've grown older and I'm opening up my mind, you get these different challenges, which makes you question a lot of things. So I do believe there is a higher power, and I'll leave it there. Whether it's a God or it's the universe or et cetera, I can't really put my finger on it as yet. I'm still obviously going through the whole journey of defining it. and people call it, the universe, God, etc., etc. I do believe in a high power in terms of there's the people that believe it was a Big Bang, which was totally random. I know I'm simplifying it right now. I don't believe we evolved from the Big Bang, etc., etc. I do believe there was a higher power, and it's not a person. It's just that we can only describe a higher power as a person.
No, we can't. There's many ways to describe it.
No, I'm just
higher power, but
I'm just saying most people describe it. God as a person, right? So yeah, for me right now, yes, I'll describe God as a higher power who had a hand, and again, we're describing him as a person, him as well, in creating the universe and creating us as human beings.
Okay. I mean, so that's your definition. I mean, I guess so. My view is, so I never at any one point in time have an answer to your question, a definitive one, because at least how I see it is that, at least for me, it is of greater value for me, the journey, than the answer. So it's not so much about whether there is a God and his name is Jehovah or Allah, and these are their characteristics. It's the journey of discovering that, and whether or not that matters to you, or whether that has a positive impact on you. Okay? So once again, we want our answer to be correct. We want to have an answer and then kind of work with that answer. So yes, there is a God, right? And then people define that God differently. The reason why I say there's no universal God is because there's no universal human being. Okay, so each man creates God in his own image. Do you understand what I'm saying? Each God is personal. Sure. We all go to church and we all pray to a universal idea of God, but how each person interacts with that is personal.
Different, yeah.
Right? So it's almost like the idea of, for lack of a better word, if we all agree that vanilla ice cream is the best, but how you taste vanilla and how I taste vanilla cannot be the same. We don't have the same tongue. Okay? We can all agree that vanilla is the best ice cream, for argument's sake. It's not, but for argument's sake. No, I'm not saying for me. I'm just saying people will argue. But I'm saying for now, if we agree that vanilla is the best tasting ice cream in the world, fine. But how you taste vanilla and how I taste vanilla is not the same, because our tongues are different. But then you might want your vanilla with a little bit more sugar. You might want to add, I don't know, nuts to your vanilla. You might want to add, chocolate to your vanilla, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's what everyone does with the idea of God. We start with this universal base that pretty much everyone agrees upon, although it's conflicting because it's inconsistent. So God cannot be on everyone's side. It's just not possible. Not everyone can win. If everyone won, the world wouldn't look the way the world looks.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's not true. But if we agree, and that's why I asked you, let's define God. If we fundamentally agree that God is the creator of the universe, that's the first thing we're gonna, in terms of defining him, creator of the universe. Okay. On that metric, I will say that I cannot disagree or agree with that, because I have no way of knowing what put into motion the Big Bang or creation. I have no way of knowing that. So I'll leave that one blank. If we then say, do we then take God as the creator? I'll say, fine. I'll argue that there's a creator. I'm not going to argue against that. If the next question is, how did he create? We can argue that, because it definitely wasn't in 7 days. Right? No, but that's what I'm saying. We have to take this level by level.
Yeah.
All right? So, is there a creator? Sure, there could be one. There's many creation myths in the world, by the way. The reason why we believe in Christianity is primarily because of the fact that it was spread by an empire, and not because it was just the best idea. It didn't spread by the organic value of its idea. It wasn't the best idea. It was forced upon people. There wasn't a consensus that came and said, actually, of all the ideas, Christianity is the best. No, people we'll kill you if you don't believe it. So people believed it, right? Doesn't mean that it's the best of the ideas. But anyway, so that's one way of looking at it. So God is the creator, all right? And we can define that. And I feel like, okay, am I willing to say that there's something that created the universe? Fine. Did God say, let there be light? And as a result of light, there was a bang, because every bang gives light. And then now we've got an evolutionary process. Fine. I don't know. Do we say that there is a personal God, for example? Of course there's a personal God. I don't personally have one, but they are personal gods. Lots of people have personal gods. Lots of people. Some people believe those gods are their ancestors. Some people believe that their ancestors are just a vehicle to God. You know, there's this weird thing when people keep saying, no, ancestral worship is bad. I'm like, but what do you think the Jews are doing? Right? Judaism, which is the foundation of Christianity, is ancestral worship. There's people in this world that can tell you that they trace themselves all the way back to Abraham and all these people. And we celebrate them, right? Why can't we celebrate our ancestors? Anyway, is there a personal God? I think anyone that believes in a higher God by default has a personal God, because you define your relationship with God. Okay? Yes, he's all loving. Yes, he wants the best for you. Yes, apparently he's male for some reason. Why he has a gender, I don't know. Probably because it's a patriarchal society we live in.
And it was written by men.
Yes. But I have been religious before. So I can tell you how I interacted with God. And I think most people interact with God in the same way. In the sense that your God overlooks your indiscretions. Your God likes you better than other people. Your God accepts your flaws. Your God has the best interests for you. That's a personal God. That's why there's wars over religion. Because my personal God and your personal God can't coexist.
Yep.
They can't. Because if we have scarce resources, food, land, access to water, natural resources, and my God wants the best for me, and your God wants the best for you, but there's only X amount of gold, we're going to fight. It's because of our personal gods, right? Do I think that you can, although you can unfold from a universal God down into personal gods, can you do the same exercise the other way around? No, you can't. So you cannot take a bunch of personal gods and build a universal. You can't. All right, and that's why there's an inconsistency in that idea, because the world does not reflect that. It's just not. We have to step out of philosophy and go into the real world. The real world does not reflect that God loves everyone. It just doesn't. It's unfortunate. People don't. We'll do a lot of mental gymnastics to get around the world, around the fact that the world is fundamentally cruel and evil and unequal. And yeah, you can blame it on the devil, but God made the devil, and we can go down that conversation another day, right? Because one of the fundamental questions around religion is, where does evil come from? If evil was made in the Christian sense, unfortunately, people don't want to read the Bible. God creates Lucifer.
Sure.
God knows everything. So God knows that this is all going to unfold. If you can always refer to one of the favorite spaces of religion, which is the God of unknowability, maybe the best argument I've heard is God created evil because without evil there's no good, and you need evil for there to be good and evil, so that fine. Do we need evil? That's another philosophical conversation, but fine. So, is there a God, a creator? I'll say I'd have no way of knowing. If somebody gives me a good argument for it one day, I'll accept it. Is there a universal God? I'll say there is one if you need there to be one. I think there is one, but he's universal, therefore he has to be very indescript, if that makes sense. Universal things don't have much room for fluctuation, right? So the baseline is very, very thin of this universal God. It's that he probably, the three things we all agree upon: all loving, all knowing, and everywhere. That's pretty much the universal God space that everyone kind of descends from. Okay, I don't buy into that. And then any stage after that of defining God becomes much more descriptive. So the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament, two very different people, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
OG in the beginning was ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
Ruthless. I mean, and he really didn't love everyone else.
Mm.
You know, there's many stories.
Chosen.
There's many stories of just reckless evil, justified by God. You know, which raises another question, which is something evil because God says it's evil, or is it evil absolutely? So there's a great story where I think it's David. I need to remember properly. I don't know if it's David or Saul or Heron. One of the, because that's a lineage. But anyway, one of them really wants. I think David wants to marry the daughter of one of the kings. I think it's Saul. I might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But long story short, that king then consults with God, and they have a dream. And the outcome of this is that in order for David, whoever it is, to marry this princess, he must lead the Israelite army into a neighboring village that they're not currently at war with. And they make it clear in the Bible that they're not currently at war. They're just heathens, right? So they're unbelievers. And deliver to the king 200 uncircumcised, the heads of uncircumcised penises. Basically, they must go and circumcise violently and against their will 200 men and bring them the foreskins to this king, 200. And once he does that, he can now marry the daughter. That's a story that's portrayed as a fantastic example of how loyal these people were to their God. But it was just a random act of sabotage. Just unnecessary. We're not even at war. You just come over to people. We don't believe in circumcising. You guys do. Because of your own internal things, you come over here, you kill my people, you take 200 foreskins, which probably meant that they killed those people.
Yeah.
Because circumcision, if it's done violently, is just chopping off somebody's
Penis. Yeah.
right? But it's fine, because you know what? They're not our people. It's a terrible worldview. And it's even worse that God would endorse that. That just because they're not us, that we can do these things to these people. I can't subscribe to that type of thinking. Old Testament says that's perfectly fine. And there's many examples of that, where by default of not being an Israelite or just being female, the most terrible things happen to you. God of the New Testament, much nicer. But what I'm trying to say is, these are all personal things, right? So even when people read the Bible, they cherry pick.
Actually, that's true. Very selective.
They skip many parts, right? The priests that abuse children skip the parts that say you shouldn't harm children. You know, the people that allow for women to preach skip the parts that say women should not be heard in the church. The people that allow for homosexuals to be a part of their congregation skip the part that say that it's an abomination. So everyone has a personal God, because everyone picks and chooses what makes sense for them. If I have a terrible, terrible drug addiction or alcohol addiction, I might skip the parts that tell you to treat your body like a temple.
Okay.
Right? But my personal God is okay with my addiction, and he's trying to help me through it. All right? Somebody else's personal God will smite you. They will never touch alcohol, because my God says if I touch alcohol, they won't even allow alcohol into their house. Not even alcohol inside, not even for their guests. There's restaurants that don't even sell alcohol, because my God says alcohol is an abomination. I'm not allowed to touch it. Your God is with you in rehab. It's not the same God. It's not possible. Unless this God is absolutely personal to each and every single one. And it's that type of thing that when you become too personalized, then what are you? If you are absolutely personal, can you be truly universal?
No. You're even becoming more subjective.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the vanilla ice cream, all we can agree upon is that this thing is vanilla. What it is everything else. It's different to me and you.
So,
But there's value. There's still value. I guess there's value in people having their gods because fundamentally it's there to cope with a difficult life. It can become a source of superiority complex or a source of abusing other people, but fundamentally it's a source of hope. And I find lots of value in that.
Cool. So welcome back. And let's go straight back into it. I know you're very passionate about Africa, right? And just briefly, can you touch on me? I know number one, you hate the term that Africa is corrupt, and that seems to be the narrative that just seems to go around the world. But why I say that is based on your experience and your books you've read, like Guns, Germs, and Steel, brilliant book. Jared Diamond, you guys should get it. The Looting Machine as well.
Yes, by Tom Burgess, great book.
Can you explain just briefly to maybe the people, because sometimes we don't understand in terms of how we got here, how Africa, and I hate to use this term, but I do feel like we're at the bottom of the food chain. When you look at GDP contribution to the world GDP, I was looking at the stats. So just briefly on that, can you explain how we got to this point?
Briefly is not going to happen quickly. I can touch on corruption. I think briefly there's a lot of systematic things that got us to where we are. A lot of it is our fault. A lot of it is due to other things that kind of happened. I think that's the story of the world, though. So we shouldn't be too exceptional or exceptionalist in our thinking of Africa to think that something extraordinary has happened to us that hasn't happened to other places.
Sure.
Like I said earlier, slavery is the history of the world. Colonialism happened everywhere. Why empires were built time and time again. The last one was a colonial one, but why have some places been able to move forward and other places not? You mentioned Guns, Germs, and Steel. Yes, there are a lot of factors that are just against us that you can't control.
Sure.
The lay of your land, how well you can, moved from a sedentary way of life to move to a sedentary way of life from a hunter gatherer. I mean, these things are all out there. I think when we talk about what holds Africa back today, corruption is a big one of them. To put it simply, my issue is not with African corruption. I think African corruption is a huge problem. My issue is the approach that a lot of sectors of, I'll probably just say the media or global narratives tend to proclaim it as if it is something endemic within the African mentality or spirit that it is for us to be corrupt. It is something that is intrinsic within us. It is just a way of being, as if we spoke about earlier on, we spoke about the German way of doing things is to do them precisely, and the Italian way of doing things is to do things absolutely passionately and recklessly almost. It seems as if the African way of doing things is the corrupt way, which I feel is hugely unfair. The only thing that is patently African about African corruption is who suffers from it. It's only Africa that suffers from African corruption, but who benefits from it is everyone. Everyone, actually disproportionately, Africa benefits from it least and suffers from it most. And that is the only way in which African corruption is truly African, is in how you define its victims. How you define who benefits from it, that's everyone else.
It is.
And I think we cannot run away from our role in our corruption. We cannot turn around and say, oh, but we have been corrupted. No, we have agency. And we often look too much at, being victims in the process. I think we drive the process too. But I will say it simply, and we can discuss it another day, that to understand African corruption is to understand corruption of the world and to understand how the world economic system functions. This is not something that is a conspiracy theory. Corruption is just a word. Its definition, when applied to many other parts of the world, would mean American corruption. It would mean French corruption. It would mean European Union corruption. The entire way, for example, the world financial system judges and determines the value of a country's debt, for example, is corrupt. In the sense that if we define corruption in the sense that it is unfair in how it is executed,
Sure.
then the world is corrupt.
Yeah.
Right? It's patently, absolutely unfair that we persecute the African leaders without persecuting the people on the other side.
That are doing what?
We should definitely take corrupt African leaders to court. But we pretend that Switzerland doesn't hold all the money and charge interest for that and charge very good fees for that. Why is it okay for Swiss banks to accept large sums of money from people that have, sometimes through blood and murder, acquired these funds? And it's not a problem. Why don't we pull the CEOs of these banks that have taken corrupt money and profited from it and put them right next to the people that put the money in the bank accounts, right? So that for me is why I say it's unfair, because if we removed the lens of, let's call it race or ethnicity, and we just looked at the world as one, you would see an ecosystem where bad money flows from one place, gets turned into good money somewhere else, and then flows back into the world, only benefiting the places where the good money wants to go, and the places where the bad money came from gets very, very little of that. Right? Bad money, let's call it corrupt money from corrupt governments,
Wash it.
gets washed and it comes back as foreign direct investment. How much of the money goes in? And when it goes back in, does it even benefit the people that it stole from?
No.
Of course not. Whose job is it to make sure it benefits? That's, of course, the people on the ground. But that's corruption. It doesn't work that way. But I don't like the fact that we don't haul and put into jail people like Jamie Dimon, who was instrumental because of who he was at that point in time, running one of the biggest investment firms in the world, which was JP Morgan Chase, or whatever the name of it is. It JP Morgan Chase, or is it Morgan Chase now? JP Morgan?
JP Morgan, yeah.
Yeah, I think they might have an entity that has a Chase element.
Yeah.
I can't remember. You might want to edit that out.
Yeah.
But Jamie Dimon, that guy, him and his bunch of thieves on Wall Street collapsed the world economy through corruption. There's no other word for it. Subprime mortgage lending, whatever smart term you want to put, that led to the financial collapse. Targeting poor people and giving them home loans that they knew they could never repay, so they could basically trade off the debt and create very complicated financial instruments that basically function off the poverty of people. Is a corrupt practice, and nobody went to jail. Very few people went to jail. All the traders still exist today. As a matter of fact, they bailed out those banks.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and that happens all around the world. And for me, that's a weird thing. I mean, the fact that France until today has colonial tax on 14, 15 African countries. The fact that they have shown, and we forget about it, that when a country tries to leave that setup, what happens to them? Their leaders get killed, their leaders get assassinated, their countries get invaded. You know, the fact that these French-speaking countries are now beholden, they deposit their national funds into French accounts. The French central bank then dictates how much money they get back.
Oh, my God.
The fact that they pay interest on their own money. These are corrupt practices. Why hasn't every head of the French Reserve Bank been put? Why hasn't the French president been put through some type of justice somewhere at some court?
Well, I guess, you know what, and I think it comes back to, I mean, you spoke about the Bible, about being very selective as well. And that's how we're very selective and say Africa is corrupt, you know, but we don't talk about the corrupt.
Yeah, because black people are corrupt. That's what we're saying, right? When black people do it, and I'll say some of my brothers and sisters they could be a bit more refined in the way they steal, you know. They're a bit they could use more sophisticated methods, if one could say, right? But corruption is corruption, and I'm being funny when I say that. In reality, corruption is corruption, and there is this idea of economic rent, which if your country is able to bring to the world wealth that does not require its people more than anything to be educated at a level of an unskilled laborer, then your country pays economic rent on the world stage through its resources and not through its people. If you don't have natural resources, then you need your people to pay economic rent. So you have to develop your people. You can't rely on economic resources. And so education becomes more important, and upskilling becomes more important, and investing in your people becomes more important. Africa happens to have a situation like other parts of the world where if you can bring and make money without developing your people, you will choose that route. It is easier, but it also opens you up to very high levels of corruption. It's just the economics of things. It's not because people are black. Any place in the world where you have very high resources that do not require you to invest in people, you have an African situation. Sure. Always. All right. South America is the same. Large parts of the Middle East where there's oil is the same. High levels of inequality, extremely high levels of inequality, because the people that run the country do not require the people that are being run to be improved in order for them to make money. As a matter of fact, you don't even need democracy. You can make money without the will of your people. That's a very powerful place to be. If you cannot make money without the will of your people, then you will invest in your people, and you need their buy-in, and you need good elections, and you need fair treatment of people and all these things. But if I can make money and all I need is a bunch of unskilled idiots, that's what I'm going to see them as. Sorry to be crude, that's the truth. And I will remove their rights because the gold is more valuable. Mm-hmm. When you run out of those resources, things change. If you're smart about it, if you care, then you can use your resources to build your people. And then you have the best of both worlds. You've got natural resources and you've got educated people, and one system can feed the other. And when the natural resources run out, you've built a state of people that can actually also pay economic rent. But people are short-term in their thinking, and they are incentivized highly not to do so.
Yeah. And okay, so, geez, we're gonna need another podcast episode because there's some questions I wanted to ask, but I'll skip through them. Like fulfillment at work. I know you have a different view on that. Motivational speakers, it's fine. Something we'll
everything I said about religious things,
Yeah?
I never got to speak about pastors. Everything comes down to hope. I find that motivational speakers, some of them prey on hope in the same way that the charlatans in the religious space.
So why? I actually want to say this for another podcast episode because there were 5 more questions I wanted to ask you, which are more rapid fire. It's basically tradition in the podcast,
okay,
where we get to know you just a bit further. So we'll ask you some personal questions. Cool. Because I know you also have to shoot off. A very busy man.
No, not
busy changing the world here.
Not at all, but go ahead.
So yeah, it's just based off 36 questions, and we get to know you. Basically talk about going under the hood and seeing, what engine you're running and the way you think.
Sure.
Number 1, right, Mr. Ben Iwisi. Oh, is there something essential in your life that you under-investing in?
Something essential that I'm under-investing in as you speak right now?
Yeah, just generally, yeah.
Is it something that, when you speak of investment, are we speaking like monetary investment or?
I would say it could be money. I mean, it's up to you. Money, whatever comes to your mind first, money or time that you think is essential but you're under-investing in.
Yeah, I think, so I'll give you an answer for both. I think I'm currently under-investing for, depending on how long we live for the future. You could always save more, always invest more for life. I don't think we're doing badly, but I think we could definitely do a lot better. And then from a time point of view, I don't think I'm investing enough time with the people that might not be around long enough. Unfortunately, we don't live in the country of our birth, so a lot of our family members are far away.
Sure.
So it's a blessing to be able to drive for 5 hours and see people in KZN, or just get on a flight and it's an hour. Whenever we go home and we go to, Machame, where I'm from, in Kilimanjaro or Sanyaju, where my wife is from, which is just on the other side of the mountain. When we're there, there's so much rich, absolutely powerful time spent with people that I wish I could do it on a daily basis. And just because we're not close. And you know that no one lasts forever. So.
Okay. Geez, that's... you make me even be more grateful in terms of living in the country of my
Yes.
birth and being closer to my mother.
You should be.
You know,
You
being
should be.
45 minutes flights away from parents, etc., etc. Okay.
Those are very, very valuable.
And
people.
sometimes at the end, you only realize you're like, I should have actually spent more time.
Yes, I
in terms
mean,
of it,
I
yeah.
reflect I reflect a lot on the time I spent with my dad, and I'm glad we got to spend the time that we did, because I was lucky. I was raised by him. He was in my life every single day, but it wasn't enough. And then I think of people that I don't see on a daily basis, you know, and it's stuff. And you don't know what you don't have. You don't know what you have till it's gone, as the saying goes. I think people, by far more than anything else, are the most important investment you can make. And
it's true.
And it's not the same on Skype or on a WhatsApp call. At least we have those technologies now. I can't imagine having to write letters. Jesus.
Which brings me to my next question. Almost there, don't worry. Is there something you holding on to that you need to let go of?
Yeah, you know, I guess the way, you know, my father passing was very difficult, and I'm not quite sure how to necessarily let go of it. It was a very difficult thing.
Sure.
You know, particularly because it was cancer. You know, cancer is a very tough thing to watch anyone go through. But you can't help but think about it in your own sense. I would never want any one of my family members to... I actually would not... I don't have any enemies. Even if I did, I would not wish anyone to have to watch anyone they love die. It's a very painful process. And I guess, you know, because in that year so many other things kind of happened, I never really got the chance to process it properly, because, you know, my son was born that year. I got married that year.
Sure.
And it so happened that my father passed on at the beginning of that year. So, you know, it was 2015 was a hectic year. It's a year I turned 30. Crazy year. Lots of things happened. But, you know, I guess you will always mourn the loss of someone close to you. But finding peace with it is something that I'm not 100% there yet. I think I've come a long way, but there are times when it's still absolutely devastating, absolutely crushing. And you know, I'm sad that he never got to meet my son. That they were so close in time. At least they were just months apart. But anyway, it's one of those things.
Yeah. And I guess it's very... Look, I mean, I haven't had... I've been blessed, like a traumatic experience with a close family member passing. So it's it's very hard to relate, but I can only imagine, to be honest. And thank you for sharing that. I know it takes a lot as well.
Yeah, thank you. I guess you have to talk about it, I guess. Well, you don't have to, but you can try.
Second to last question, because you're a man of quotes. Is there a quote?
Am I really?
Well, you have this knack of just dropping a quote word for word, you know, at a relevant time. But anyways,
because I Googled it.
Google is your best friend, you know. Is there quotes you live by or think often, just in your life?
All things in time.
Mm-hmm.
All things in time. I don't even know who said it, but it's something.
Oh, full stop. All things in time.
That's it.
Period.
Yeah, all things. So it gives me, you know, all things in time. You know, it just means that I guess it's something that I think I heard my mom say. I've heard my mom say. It gives me, I guess, peace, in the sense that when things are tough, it will pass.
This too shall pass.
I guess it's another way of saying this too shall pass. In the sense that, but see, this is a double-sided coin, or it's a two-sided coin. In the sense that everything will end. That is a cause for both great joy and hope, but also cause for great concern and dread and fear. So all things in time. So even if you're sitting in a moment and you're reflecting, and like, oh, I love this moment so much, you must know that it will pass. In the same way, if you are sitting in a moment and you're thinking, I hate this, you must know that it will also pass. So every moment that you have is fleeting in and of itself.
Yeah.
So even if you're sitting right now thinking, Eish, you know what, I really wish I would just get that job promotion now. I can't believe I've been work level 1 for so long.
Yeah,
you know what,
that's
all things in time. That thing will come and it will go. But then also, and we shouldn't allow it to steal from our moments of joy.
That's true.
But also know that, cherish those moments, because they too will also unfortunately have to go. So it's a source of both great hope and also great fear, I guess.
I think it's
because you
also-
never want to think of the bad stuff.
Which is, for me, I think I'm at peace with. It's beautiful as well. I guess it's how you look at it as well. All things in time, and it's similar to, I know Augmandino actually spoke about this. This too shall pass in one of his books. Like good times will pass, bad times will pass, and you just have to accept it. You're actually quoting a lot of Stoics there.
We need a whole session. Marcus Aurelius and the
Seneca,
Stoics and Seneca and the rest.
Bertrand Russell, which you introduced me to.
Bertrand Russell, how have you found him?
He's been great. I loved his. Is it lazy? Oh, in praise of idleness.
In praise of how?
Because I'm a very lazy person and I love to procrastinate. But anyways, and I hope you don't teach your son this in terms of procrastination, which brings me to my last question.
Yes.
You have a beautiful son, you have a beautiful family as well, and we've spoken about the end a lot, and you just touched on it now, that all things will pass, etc., etc. When you can view it in many other ways, but when you get to the end, it doesn't even have to be the end, actually. What's the one lesson, if you, for example, had to die today or tell your son, what's the one lesson you would love to leave your son?
If it's one lesson, is be kind. All right, be kind. That's the first thing. All right, so be kind to even your worst enemy. If you can't be kind to him, then or her, then you need to work on some issues, right? Also, don't have any enemies. That's easier that way. Be kind. And I think, one thing that I remember from my dad a lot was that, he treated everyone the same. So there was no real difference whether you were someone that was perceived to be of a very particular standing in society, or if you were someone that was just a friend of his, or if it was somebody that was in your employ for whatever reason, or just a random stranger. He treated everyone with kindness. I think that's what he did. He really liked the fact that, he could learn from almost anyone. So that's what I feel that's probably the lesson I would leave. Just be kind to everyone. Be kind to everyone. A very philosophical way of putting it is treat everyone as an end in and of themselves and not just a means. Okay? And to treat everyone as an end is to recognize that everything that is within you is within somebody else. Everyone has dreams. Everyone has aspirations. Everybody wants to be respected. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. Now, just because somebody happens to be serving you tea and you don't like the tea doesn't mean that you get to scream at them as if they are not an end in and of themselves, as if they are not people within themselves, that their life must go on after you. So how are you treating them? Now if you treat someone just as a means, it means just because in these half an hour while I'm at this restaurant, you are serving me, then I'm just treating you as a means to an end. You bring me my food and my drinks and then I pay you. But if I treat you as an end, then I should recognize that you walked into this building just like me with your own issues and your own frustrations and your own joys and your own hopes. And there's no reason that all that disappears because in this moment you're performing a function for me.
And I'd like to actually end it on that note in terms of thank you for being kind to me and allowing me to interview.
You've been very kind to me too.
And
sir.
also, I know we're a bit over time, but thank you for sharing those nuggets. I don't want to hold you back from your other commitments.
We'll do it again.
Yes, we definitely. I have many other questions. And yeah, thank you for inviting me into your home once again. I really appreciate it. And I hope even one or two people can actually find value in the nuggets you're sharing. And I think just based on that, I think you would have done a lot, about you've changed my view in terms of life and the way I view things. So I hope also how you've actually dropped these nuggets today, someone can be moved and become a better human being. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your kind words. I too have obviously gained a lot from the process. I've always enjoyed our conversations, Mnotho. It's a shame that we don't have them as often as we used to. But maybe the next one we can do at the Southern Sun in Maputo or something. Which has been the source of many conversations over what's the Laurentina Preta. Anyway,
all right,
thanks.
All right, cool. Thank you.